Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the news that the COVID inquiry has announced that it will be investigating the VIP lane, which is probably the most blatantly corrupt aspect to the Tories' misguided response to the pandemic in 2020. This should be interesting. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So the VIP lane, so called because it was a group of people and organisations that Tory ministers collected in order to give priority to for public procurement contracts for vital medical equipment, including famously PPE. The official name for the system was the high priority lane, but VIP lane is more accurate. Like, it might have been possible for the government to justify this if the VIP lane contained organisations with a proven track record of delivering medical equipment. And so maybe you imagine a scenario where you've got all of these suppliers of medical equipment. Some of them produce it directly and sell it to you. Some of them just are the middlemen, they supply it, but they've got a proven track record, right, of delivering medical equipment that the NHS needs. And the government look at it and they go, okay, well, these guys donate to the Conservative Party, so we want to give them priority, and these guys don't, so, you know. So we'll create this high priority lane, which has all the Conservative donating groups in it. See, that would have been corrupt, but they could have gotten away with it because nonetheless, when they're giving them these contracts, and they could have given them contracts well over the odds, they were getting away with that, to give them more profits, to reward them for donating to the Conservative Party. And they at least would have gotten the PPE or other medical equipment that they ordered. But that is not happened. That is not what happened. You know, because that level of corruption, they could try and justify it and they probably would get away with it. There's enough people blinkered enough to let them get away with it. This was way more blatant. It had individuals, not groups, not organisations, not large companies, individuals with absolutely no experience of supplying medical equipment. They created companies, they registered companies on Companies House, hastily set up to make it look like these were established businesses. It's like, oh, established April 2020. Oh yeah, that's convincing. You know, many have since been wound down. Companies with listed assets of a few £1,000s were given public contracts worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. It was proper in-your-face corruption and justified by the emergency nature of COVID. Oh, there's a lot of demand for PPE now, so we have to pay a premium. Not to the extent we didn't. Before we found out about the secretive VIP lane, because we didn't find out for a long time, I remember news reports of existing suppliers based in the UK, people who manufacture PPE, and they were on the news saying, well, look, we're fulfilling orders for like governments around the world, but if we get an NHS order, we'll put it to the top of the list. We will prioritise any NHS orders. Oh, have you received any NHS orders? No, we haven't. What was that about? Labour were asking the Conservatives about this in Parliament. Why the delay in ordering PPE? Why are these suppliers not getting orders? The government's response was to say that they had to do their due diligence. It takes time, sorry about that, but we have to make sure we're spending the money wisely. This, of course, turned out to be a lie. What they were doing was someone had hit upon the idea of shoveling large amounts of public money into the hands of donors and friends. The PPE ordered via this system was massively overpriced, even by the standards of the international prices at the time. Significant amounts of the PPE ordered simply never arrived, or when it did not meet the specifications and had to be junked. We're still paying to store some of that right now. Can't be used. Totally unsuitable. None of this should have been a surprise. You know, if you give me a load of money to order, give me £500,000 to order so many medical gowns, I'll just Google things until I find someone who seems to be able to supply me. I don't know who the reliable suppliers are. So it's easy for someone with no experience to get ripped off. But it would have been even worse than that, because the people who were given this money were just in it for the money. They were just trying to maximise their profits. The cheaper they could buy the equipment, the more money they got to keep. So they will have ordered from the cheapest supplier that they could find, massively increasing the chances that it would not be fit for purpose, but also knowing that if they messed up, the government would not pursue legal action against them because they're a mate, aren't they? They're a donor. They're getting this as a bung. And this is what turned out in so many cases. Equipment that just couldn't be used. Equipment that had already expired and they'd put a new expiration sticker on top of it. we didn't have a government running things, we had a crime syndicate. And we've just learned that the COVID inquiry is definitely going to look at it. It won't be soon, but there are pros and cons to that. The COVID inquiry is going to carry out preliminary hearings on this next year and then aims to take evidence in early 2025. Now, there are people there going, okay, we can't wait that long. This is getting ridiculous. But then there's a lot to go through. And you think to yourself, this is about procurement and we're still doing that now. So shouldn't we have put this one further, closer so that we could learn lessons from it? But there are political advantages to this evidence being heard later on. Because in theory, you might think, well, explosive revelations about what is clearly the most blatantly corrupt Tory actions of all. Wouldn't that be better before the election so we can use it for the election campaign? In theory. But let's be honest, the mainstream media is not exactly shining much of a spotlight on the COVID inquiry. And Labour have got other more present concerns for the public. It's not really in their interests at the moment to bang on about something the Tories did in 2020 when they've got plenty of material to bang on about what they're doing right now, or not doing, as the case may be. But in early 2025, doesn't matter when the election is, it's definitely over then. The election will definitely have happened by the time this is now heard. The daily government clown car crashes will be over because it'll be Labour in power. In addition, Labour will not mind at all keeping the focus on what the Tories have been up to while they work to quietly fix things behind the scenes. Like right now, Labour are trying to shine the spotlight on what the Tories are doing right now, because that's of what's most concerned to voters. Once Labour are in power, the Tories aren't really doing very much at that time. In the present, there's not a lot going on other than the usual infighting, but they're in opposition. That's not a big issue. So then Labour can afford to start going, right, let's now have a look at what they were doing, shall we? So while they quietly fix things behind the scenes, that's what they can do. I think there are advantages to hearing this evidence at what will hopefully be a more politically stable time. That's a comparative term, by the way. It also means, of course, there will be absolutely no resistance from the government in terms of handing over documents. The COVID inquiry will have whatever it wants. The problem with the current government is they flip between two extremes. They begin by initially resisting handing anything over at all. Oh, you don't need to see that. Yes, we do. And when that doesn't work, as it hasn't, they then hand over everything in the hope that doing a snow job means that the relevant information is lost like a needle in a haystack amongst this avalanche of crap that the inquiry really didn't need to see. Whereas the Labour government can hand over everything they're asked for and also say, oh, we've put a few post-it notes in there. You might be particularly interested in those bits. And in terms of who would be expected to give evidence, you would imagine Michael Gove. He ran the Cabinet Office at the time, and it was the Cabinet Office managing the VIP lane. I say managing it. It seemed to take the form of random Tory ministers popping in and going, oh, my mate Dave, he'd like to go on that list, please. Matt Hancock as Health Secretary, of course. I wonder if they'll also take evidence from Matt Hancock's local pub landlord. Boris Johnson as Prime Minister and Rishi Sunak as Chancellor. Now, Sunak's department would have had to sign off on the entire process, of course, so he would certainly be expected to give evidence. We might need to make sure he's not left the country. We keep talking about the fact that after the election, he'll stand down as party leader, of course he will. And then we're talking about him moving to California. I don't think he'll move to California immediately, but we probably need to make sure he doesn't move to California before these hearings. Now, I'm not a legal expert, of course, but it occurs to me, if there ever were to be criminal charges brought over the excessive deaths caused by Tory corruption in 2020, and I don't know how likely that is, it won't come as a direct result of the inquiry, but it could come as part of the evidence of the inquiry. But if it's going to happen at all, surely the COVID inquiry evidence on the VIP lane would be Exhibit A, because to me, it's just the most blatant corruption. And I'm also curious about how it'll get written up in the inquiry report, which won't be for a long time. Usually with a public inquiry, it's a case of identifying mistakes, making recommendations for ministers to implement to make sure those mistakes are not repeated, right? But although actual mistakes will have been made, genuine mistakes, this is just blatant corruption. Like, how do you not recommend that maybe the answer to this is not to allow mob bosses to run the government? Obviously, they can't write that. So I am curious how they're going to broach the subject of the very obvious widespread corruption. And it'll give Labour the opportunity to point out the destructive corruption of a Tory government as well. It's like, yes, the Conservatives at the time will try and defend themselves by saying, oh no, that was those people. They're no longer in our top team, unless Michael Gove is still sticking around. But maybe they'll have to sacrifice him for the sake of that. But I think this was so widespread, I don't think that'll wash. After all, if you can have Tory councillors, they knew about it because they were asking to be put on the VIP lane. If it was that widespread that Tory councillors were asking to be put on the VIP lane, then senior Tory MPs must have known about it. This really should be made to stick to the entire party until they have a complete clear out anyway. And I mean a complete clear out. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.